In 1975, an engineer at Kodak switched on a device he had built from spare parts and captured the first digital photograph in history. Black and white, the size of a toaster, 23 seconds to save a single image. His bosses looked at the machine that would one day destroy the company and told him to keep it quiet. 37 years later, Kodak was bankrupt, killed by the exact technology it had invented first. This is the Kodak digital camera failure story, and it is not about a company that failed to see the future. It is about what happens when you see it perfectly and bury it anyway. To understand the decision, you have to understand the machine that made it. The Eastman Kodak Company was founded in 1888 by George Eastman, whose insight was not the camera, but the business model around it. Eastman did not make his fortune selling cameras. He made it selling film, and the chemicals, the paper, and the processing that film required. This is the razor and blades model, and Kodak may have executed it more perfectly than any company in history. The camera was cheap. The film was not. Every photograph anyone took anywhere in the world was, for most of the 20th century, a small recurring payment to Kodak. By the 1970s, Kodak controlled around 90% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in the United States. The profit margins on film were extraordinary, among the highest of any consumer product on earth. Kodak's film business was not just profitable, it was one of the great money machines in the history of American capitalism, generating billions of dollars a year with the reliability of a utility. So when a young engineer named Stephen Sasson, working in Kodak's own applied research lab, assembled a device that captured images with no film at all, the significance was immediately obvious to everyone who saw it. A camera that needed no film was a camera that generated no recurring revenue. It was, from Kodak's perspective, not a product. It was an attack on the business itself. Here is the part of the story that is usually left out. Kodak did not ignore digital photography. Kodak invested enormous sums in it, more than almost any other company, and became, for a time, extremely good at it. After Sasson's prototype, Kodak's engineers kept working. Through the 1980s and 90s, Kodak filed thousands of patents in digital imaging. It built some of the best image sensors in the world. In 1991, it released a professional digital camera system based on a Nikon body, aimed at photojournalists. Kodak scientists won awards. Kodak's patent portfolio in digital imaging would eventually become so valuable that, at the very end, it was one of the only things the company had left to sell. In 1981, Kodak's own market intelligence department produced an internal report. It analyzed the likely trajectory of digital imaging and reached a striking conclusion. Digital photography had the potential to replace Kodak's film business, but not immediately. The report estimated that Kodak had roughly 10 years before digital would begin to seriously erode film, and that the full transition might take until around the year 2010. That estimate was remarkably accurate. Kodak did not fail to predict the future. A Kodak analyst predicted it, in writing, in 1981, almost to the year. The question that defines this story is what a company does with a warning that precise and that far away. The signal Kodak missed was not that digital was coming. It was what to do about the fact that digital was coming and would take a long time to arrive. A 10-year runway is a peculiar kind of warning. It is long enough that acting immediately means sacrificing a decade of the most profitable business in the company to build a future that does not yet pay. And it is short enough that when the transition finally accelerates, it accelerates faster than any large organization can turn. Kodak spent that decade, and the one after it, trying to have digital both ways, investing in the technology while structuring the company to protect film for as long as possible. The clearest example came in the 1990s. Kodak developed a hybrid product called the Photo CD, a way to store film-based photographs digitally on a disc. It was an attempt to bridge the two worlds. It was also revealing, even Kodak's digital strategy was designed to keep film at the center. The company was building digital products whose purpose was to preserve the film business, not replace it. When Kodak did commit to digital cameras in the early 2000s, It committed in the most Kodak way possible. It sold digital cameras at low margins, and then tried to make its money the old way, by selling consumers digital prints. For a brief period in the mid-2000s, Kodak was actually the #1 seller of digital cameras in the United States. But it was losing money on nearly every one, still trying to reconstruct the razor and blades model in a world that no longer needed blades. The deeper problem was structural. Kodak was a chemistry company. Its factories made film. Its research strength was in coatings and emulsions. Its sales force sold to drugstores and photo labs. Its culture, its assets, and its people were all optimized for a business that digital photography did not need. You cannot easily turn a chemical company into an electronics company. And every year Kodak delayed made the turn harder, because every year film funded the delay. The prediction from 1981 came true almost on schedule. Around the year 2000, digital camera sales began to climb steeply. Then, a few years later, a second wave arrived that even Kodak's careful analysts had not fully anticipated. The camera phone. Photography did not just go digital. It dissolved into a feature of another device entirely. Kodak's film sales, which had been the most reliable revenue stream in consumer products for 100 years, began to collapse. Between 2003 and 2011, the market for photographic film fell by roughly half, and then half again, and kept falling. The money machine did not slow down. It fell off a cliff. There was no single meeting where Kodak chose to die. That is what makes the story so difficult. There was instead a long series of reasonable decisions, each of which protected the profitable present at a small cost to the uncertain future, and which added up, over 3 decades, to a company structurally incapable of surviving the transition it had predicted. By the late 2000s, Kodak was selling divisions, cutting tens of thousands of jobs, and borrowing against its patent portfolio to stay alive. The digital imaging patents, the fruit of all that early research, became a lifeline, licensed and eventually sold to the very companies that had built the digital future Kodak could not commercialize. On January 19, 2012, Eastman Kodak filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. A company that had employed 145,000 people at its peak, that had been one of the 30 companies in the Dow Jones Industrial Average for more than 70 years, that had invented the technology of digital photography in its own laboratory, was insolvent. Kodak survived, in a diminished form. It emerged from bankruptcy in 2013 as a much smaller company focused on commercial printing and imaging, having shed its consumer film legacy, its patents, and most of its workforce. The Kodak that exists today is a modest industrial imaging business. The Kodak that owned every photograph in the world is gone. Steven Sassen's original 1975 prototype survives. It is held in the collection of a museum, the first digital camera, built inside the company that digital cameras destroyed. In 2009, Sasson received the National Medal of Technology and Innovation from the President of the United States. He spent his entire career at Kodak. The easy version of the Kodak story is that a company was too slow, too complacent, too blind to see digital coming. That version is comforting because it suggests the failure was avoidable, that smarter people would have seen it. But Kodak did see it. A Kodak analyst predicted the timeline in 1981 and was almost exactly right. The harder version is this. The thing that made Kodak vulnerable was not blindness, it was success. The film business was so profitable, so central, so much the identity of the company, that every decision to protect it was rational in the moment, and the sum of those rational decisions was fatal. This is the innovator's dilemma in its purest form. The better your current business, the harder it is to walk away from it, even when you can see exactly what is coming. So here is the question worth sitting with. Kodak's leaders were not fools. They were intelligent people, looking at accurate forecasts, making defensible decisions to protect the most profitable business in their industry, and it destroyed the company. If you were running a company whose best current business was being slowly obsoleted by a technology you yourself had invented, and you knew you had perhaps a decade before the collapse, what would you actually do? Would you burn the profitable present to build the uncertain future? Or would you do exactly what Kodak did? The comments are open. Steven Sassen's account of building the first digital camera is publicly available through the IEEE and the Computer History Museum. The Harvard Business School case on Kodak's digital transition is the essential analytical source. Everything referenced in this video is listed in the description below.